A waitress told a billionaire to never raise his voice at her again. 24 hours later, she woke up in his penthouse with a $250,000 contract and a target on her back because what he needed wasn't a girlfriend. It was bait for a killer. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the viral video, before the contract, before Sarah Chen realized that standing up for yourself can get you killed. Tuesday, March 12, 2024, the Meridian Restaurant, where a $300 steak is considered affordable and the waitstaff are trained to be invisible. Sarah Chen, 26 years old, NYU dropout, student debt, $87,000, working 3 jobs, waitress at the Meridian, weekend barista, and Thursday night bartender in Brooklyn. Combined income after taxes, $34,000 a year. She had $347 in her checking account. Rent was due in 4 days. And she was about to have the worst and best night of her life. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. At 8:47 p.m., Alexander Sterling walked into the Meridian, and Sarah's life went from ordinary to dangerous in under 60 seconds. Alexander Sterling, age 38. CEO of Sterling Innovations, a cybersecurity firm worth $4.7 billion. Forbes list, Davos regular, a man who didn't hear the word no very often. Sarah approaches his table. Alexander is already on his phone, not acknowledging her. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Meridian. Can I start you with? Alexander cuts her off, not looking up. Bourbon neat, top shelf, and make it fast. Sarah's jaw tightens slightly, but she maintains composure. Of course. And for your guests, still on his phone, irritated, Alexander snaps back. They can order themselves. Are you deaf? The restaurant noise fades. Other diners glance over. Sarah stands very still. Now, here's what you need to understand about Sarah Chen. She'd been yelled at by customers before, belittled, dismissed. She'd swallowed it every time because she needed the job. But on this particular night, Sarah had just gotten a text from her landlord threatening eviction. Her mother's medical bills were overdue, and she had exactly 0 patients left. Sarah sets down her notepad, slowly, deliberately. Sir, I'm going to say this once. Shout at me again and this ends. You can speak to me with respect or you can find another waitress, your choice. Dead silence. Alexander's associates freeze. The entire restaurant seems to stop. Alexander slowly looks up from his phone, meeting Sarah's eyes for the first time. 5 full seconds, Alexander Sterling stared at the woman who had just challenged him in front of his business partners. And in those 5 seconds, 3 things happened. Someone started recording. Alexander's expression changed. And Sarah's hand trembled slightly, but she didn't back down. 1, someone started recording. 2, Alexander Sterling smiled. And 3, Sarah Chen had no idea she just walked into a trap. Alexander leans back, amused. You've got spine, I respect that. Bourbon, please, and my apologies. Sarah nods curtly and walks away. Alexander watches her go, something calculating in his expression. Sarah served that table for 2 hours. Alexander was polite, left a $500 tip on a $400 bill, and a business card with a handwritten note. Call me tomorrow, you passed the test. She threw the card away. She had no idea that someone in the restaurant had posted the confrontation to TikTok. By midnight, it had 2 million views. Waitress destroys entitled billionaire. Watch her shut him down. Hashtag respect service workers. Hashtag eat the rich. By morning, it had 15 million views. By noon, news outlets were covering it. And by 3:00 p.m., Alexander Sterling's PR team was in full crisis mode. Because here's what Sarah didn't know. Alexander Sterling wasn't just a billionaire. He was a billionaire in the middle of a hostile takeover attempt. And his board of directors was looking for any excuse to remove him. The video gave them exactly what they needed. News headlines screamed, Sterling CEO's verbal abuse caught on camera and billionaire's meltdown goes viral. Alexander had 72 hours to repair his public image or lose his company, and he had a plan, a dangerous one. At 6:00 a.m. the next morning, Sarah woke up to 247 missed calls. Her phone was on fire. Text messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Reporters outside her apartment building. Her Instagram flooded with thousands of new followers. She didn't understand what was happening until she opened TikTok and saw herself, her face, her voice. Her moment of defiance watched by millions, and then her phone rang, unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. It was Alexander Sterling. Miss Chen, he said, voice smooth as silk. I believe we need to talk. I have a proposition for you, one that could solve both our problems. Meet me at my office in 2 hours or turn on the news and watch me destroy your life on national television. Your choice. The line went dead. Sarah sat on her bed, staring at her phone, her hands shaking. She had 2 hours to decide, and absolutely no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. Sarah woke up to 847 Instagram notifications, 23 interview requests, and one very persistent caller, Lucas Hartman, Alexander Sterling's attorney. Sarah ignored the calls at first, then finally answered in frustration. "Hello." The voice on the other end was smooth and professional. "Ms. Chen, my name is Lucas Hartman. I represent Alexander Sterling. We need to meet today." "I'm not interested in. I'm authorized to offer you $250,000 for 3 months of your time, all expenses paid. Consider it compensation for your discomfort." Sarah went silent. $250,000 would change her life. 2 hours later, Sarah sat in a conference room in Sterling Tower overlooking Central Park. And what she learned there would trap her in a game she didn't understand. Alexander looked at her directly. "You're probably wondering what the $250,000 is for." The thought crossed my mind. Alexander slid a contract across the table. "I need a partner, fake, obviously, public appearances, social media presence, 3 months. You play the role of the woman who tamed me. I get my reputation back. You get $250,000. Sarah picked up the contract and flipped through the pages. It seemed simple, too simple. And Sarah Chen was smart enough to know that when something seems too good to be true. "What's the catch?" Alexander and Lucas exchanged a glance. "No catch, just commitment. Once you sign, you're in, no backing out, no questions, 3 months. Sarah stared at the contract, at the number, $250,000, at her debt, at her mother's medical bills. Her hands trembled as she held the pen. Every rational part of her brain screamed to walk away. But rational doesn't cover chemotherapy. Rational doesn't erase $87,000 in student loans. Lucas leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, I need to be clear about something. This contract includes an NDA, a strict one. You cannot discuss the terms of this arrangement with anyone, not friends, not family, not the media. Violation results in immediate termination and a lawsuit for damages." "How much in damages?" $3 million. Sarah's pen hovered over the signature line. Alexander spoke quietly. "Sarah, you stood up to me when no one else would. You could have been fired. You chose dignity over safety. That takes courage. This is just business. 3 months. Then you walk away debt-free and I keep my company. Everyone wins." Sarah signed. And the moment her pen left that paper, she became the most valuable piece on a chessboard she couldn't see. The first week was a whirlwind. Designer clothes, luxury hotels, photographers at every corner. Sarah played her part perfectly. The media ate it up. Billionaire reformed by brave waitress. Love story for the modern age. Alexander's approval rating soared. His board backed off. Sarah found herself in penthouse suites, trying on jewelry worth more than her yearly salary. She attended charity galas where a single plate of food cost what she used to make in a week. She smiled for cameras. She held Alexander's hand. She posted carefully curated photos to Instagram and watched her follower count explode. It should have felt like a fairy tale, but fairy tales don't come with security details that never sleep. Sarah started noticing things, small things, wrong things, security that seemed excessive for a simple PR stunt, meetings Alexander wouldn't explain, and the way Lucas watched her, not like an attorney watching a contractor, like a handler watching an asset. At events, she'd catch Alexander in intense whispered conversations with Lucas, both looking at a tablet with concern, conversations that stopped the moment she approached. Phone calls he'd take in another room, his voice low and urgent, and the questions, always the questions. "Has anyone contacted you? Reporters? Strangers? Have you noticed anyone following you? Who have you told about our arrangement?" On day 9, Sarah couldn't ignore it anymore. She went back to her apartment, the one she was still paying rent on even though she hadn't slept there in a week, and started digging. She opened her laptop and began searching. Alexander Sterling, Sterling Innovations, recent news, SEC filings, court documents, and what she found made her blood run cold. 3 weeks before their restaurant encounter, Sterling Innovations suffered a massive data breach. Classified government contracts, financial records of Fortune 500 clients. Proprietary cybersecurity algorithms, all leaked to competitors. The damage was estimated at $800 million, and the FBI suspected an inside job. News articles mentioned an ongoing federal investigation, subpoenas, witnesses being interviewed, but the story had been buried, completely overshadowed by something else, by her, by the viral video, by the love story that had captivated millions. Sarah sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. She wasn't hired to fix Alexander's reputation. She was hired to distract from something much bigger. The viral video hadn't been an accident. The confrontation hadn't been random. Alexander Sterling had orchestrated the entire thing. He'd been rude on purpose. He'd wanted her to snap back. He'd needed someone to film it. He'd needed the story, and she'd given it to him. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. "Dinner tomorrow night, the plaza. Wear the blue dress. Photographers will be there." Her hands were shaking as she typed back. Okay. She was about to find out just how dangerous that distraction would be. Day 14. The Metropolitan Museum Gala, 2,000 guests, 50 photographers, and one person who wanted Sarah Chen dead. Sarah was supposed to smile, pose, and make Alexander look reformed. Instead, she was about to fight for her life. She stood near the bar in a stunning gown, Alexander at her side, when a friendly woman approached. Elegant. Warm smile, expensive jewelry. You must be Sarah, I'm Rebecca Morgan. I just had to tell you, you and Alexander are relationship goals. Sarah smiled politely. Thank you, that's sweet. Let me buy you a drink. What are you having? Across the room, Lucas was watching. His expression suddenly became alert. Sarah accepted the drink, a cosmopolitan. She took one sip, and within 30 seconds, she knew something was catastrophically wrong. Her vision blurred. Her hands started tingling. The room tilted sideways. She turned to Rebecca, voice tight. What did you put in my drink? Rebecca's smile never faded. She leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. A message. Tell Alexander the widow sends her regards, and if he doesn't deliver what he promised, you're next. Sarah stumbled. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. Alexander appeared instantly, catching her before she fell. Get the car, now, he said to Lucas, his voice urgent. Alexander carried Sarah out of the gala. Photographers thought it was romantic. They had no idea they were documenting an assassination attempt. The car sped through New York streets. Sarah was in the back seat, fighting to stay conscious. Alexander was on his phone, his voice low and controlled. She was poisoned. Low dose meant to send a message, not kill. Yes, I know what this means. The widow knows about Sarah. Sarah, fighting through the fog in her mind, grabbed Alexander's arm. Who is the widow? Alexander met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real fear. The person who killed my father, and now she knows you're important to me. Sarah's head was spinning, and not just from the poison. Your father! Alexander, what are you talking about? What did you get me into? Something I should have kept you out of. I'm sorry, Sarah. I thought if I kept you visible, kept you in the public eye, you'd be safe. I was wrong. The car pulled up to a private entrance of Mount Sinai Hospital. Doctors were already waiting. As they lifted Sarah onto a gurney, she grabbed Alexander's wrist with surprising strength. Tell me the truth, all of it, or I walk away the second I can stand. Alexander nodded slowly. I will, I promise. But first, we need to make sure you survive the night. As they wheeled her away, Sarah heard Lucas speaking quietly to Alexander in the hallway. She's escalating. First the breach, then the threats, now this. She's not going to stop until she gets what she wants. Then we give it to her. Alexander, you can't possibly. I said we give it to her. Sarah closed her eyes, her heart racing. She'd signed up for a fake relationship, a publicity stunt, 3 months and a paycheck. Instead, she'd walked into a war. Sarah was in a private medical facility, recovering. An IV was in her arm. Alexander and Lucas stood over her. Looked at Alexander, groggy but furious. You used me as bait. Alexander didn't deny it. Yes. For what, some corporate spy game? Alexander sat down, exhausted. For my father's killer. 5 years ago, news broke across every major outlet. Breaking news, tech mogul Robert Sterling found dead in apparent suicide. Alexander's voice was hollow as he continued. They ruled it suicide, jumped from his office building, but my father didn't kill himself. He was murdered. His face hardened with the memory. 6 months before he died, my father discovered someone inside Sterling Innovations was selling secrets to a criminal syndicate. He was going to expose them, so they killed him and made it look like he jumped. Sarah's mind was racing. And you think this widow person is part of the syndicate? Lucas spoke for the first time, his voice measured and cold. We don't think, we know. The widow runs the entire operation. She's been trying to take control of Sterling Innovations for 5 years. The data breach, that was her. She has someone on the inside. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. And I'm bait to draw them out. You're a distraction, Alexander corrected. The traitor thinks we're focused on PR. On you, they're getting sloppy, making moves, and when they slip up, we'll catch them. Sarah ripped out her IV and stood up despite the dizziness washing over her. I'm done, keep your money. I'm not dying for your revenge. She headed for the door. Lucas moved to block it. You can't leave, Miss Chen. Watch me. Lucas's voice turned cold. The widow knows your face now. If you leave Alexander's protection, you're dead in 48 hours. The only reason you're alive is because you're valuable to him. Stop being valuable and you stop being protected. Sarah looked between them, feeling the walls closing in. She was trapped. Alexander stood and walked toward her slowly. Sarah, I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I couldn't risk it. I couldn't risk you walking away before we had a chance. A chance at what? Getting me killed? A chance at justice. My father built that company from nothing. He employed thousands of people. He believed in using technology to protect people, not exploit them. And someone murdered him for it. I've spent 5 years trying to find out who. 5 years of dead ends and false leads. Then the data breach happened. And I realized the widow was making her move. She was getting bold. All I needed was the right distraction. So you created me. The viral video wasn't an accident. No, it wasn't. I needed the world watching me for the wrong reasons. I needed the widow to think I was scrambling, desperate, focused on saving my image instead of investigating the breach. And it worked. She got confident. She started communicating with her inside contact more frequently. We've traced dozens of messages in the past 2 weeks alone. Sarah's voice was shaking. You poisoned me to prove a point. She poisoned you to prove one. I would never have put you in that position if I'd known she'd escalate this quickly. Lucas stepped forward. We have a safe house, full security, medical staff on site 24/7. You'll be protected. Sarah laughed bitterly. A safe house is just a prettier prison. Maybe, Alexander admitted. But it's the only option you have right now. Help us catch the widow and you walk away, free, safe, with your money. Sarah Chen realized something terrifying in that moment. She wasn't an employee anymore. She was a prisoner, and the only way out was through. Sarah had two choices, be bait or be the hunter. She chose neither. She decided to be smarter than both. For 2 weeks, Sarah pretended to play along. She attended events. She smiled for cameras. She held Alexander's hand and posted photos that made millions believe in their love story. But at night, she investigated. She used her phone to secretly record conversations. She took note of who had access to Alexander's schedule. She memorized security codes. She watched how Lucas and Alexander's team operated, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that didn't fit. And what she discovered would crack the case wide open. Sarah had an advantage Alexander and Lucas didn't. She was a waitress. She'd spent years observing people without being seen, reading body language, noticing who ordered what, who paid, who was uncomfortable, who was lying. She knew how to listen without being noticed. In Alexander's world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, no one paid attention to the woman serving drinks. They'd forgotten she was there. But Sarah never forgot. She saw everything. She noticed that Lucas always left the room before certain phone calls. That he checked his personal phone obsessively during meetings. That he redirected conversations away from certain topics. That he asked very specific questions about Sarah's movements. On day 27, Sarah found it, the smoking gun. She was alone in Alexander's penthouse, supposedly resting when she accessed his security system. She'd watched him enter the code dozens of times. For 739, his father's birthday, she pulled up footage from 3 days before the gala, and there he was. Lucas Hartman, Alexander's attorney, his most trusted advisor, the man who'd worked for the Sterling family for 15 years, meeting with a woman in a parking garage, handing her an envelope, receiving a phone in return. Sarah's heart pounded as she rewound the footage, enhanced the image, zoomed in on the woman's face. Rebecca Morgan, the woman who'd poisoned her at the gala. She kept digging. Lucas accessing secure files he had no authorization for. Lucas's bank records, obtained through methods she'd rather not explain, showing offshore payments totaling $4.3 million over the past 18 months. Lucas communicating with an encrypted number that only sent messages at 3 a.m. Lucas was the traitor. Sarah's hands shook as she took screenshots of everything, downloaded the files to a thumb drive, prepared to show Alexander. It was you the whole time, she whispered to herself, but Sarah made a critical mistake. She didn't realize Lucas had the penthouse under surveillance too. Cameras Alexander didn't even know about. Feeds that went directly to Lucas's phone, and he'd been watching her watch him. In his car parked 3 blocks away, Lucas stared at the live feed on his tablet. Sarah frantically copying files. Sarah discovering everything. He picked up his phone, made a call. His voice was calm, almost disappointed. She knows. Activate the contingency. On the other end of the line, a woman's voice responded. Cold, efficient. Understood. How do you want it done? Lucas glanced at the feed one more time. Sarah was texting someone now, probably trying to reach Alexander. Make it look like an accident. She's been under stress, poison complications, heart failure. The narrative writes itself. And Alexander, let him mourn. He'll be easier to control when he's broken. Lucas ended the call, started his car, and drove toward the penthouse where Sarah Chen had exactly 14 minutes left to live. Unless she figured out the danger she was in. Sarah needed to tell Alexander, but Alexander was in Boston for an emergency board meeting. And Lucas was already in the penthouse. She heard the elevator doors open. Her blood went cold. She had 30 seconds to hide the evidence and act natural. She had 20 seconds. And then Lucas walked into the living room with a gun. Sarah froze. Sarah put the phone down. Her voice came out shakier than she wanted. Alexander will know. He'll figure out. Lucas laughed bitterly. Alexander is in a board meeting I scheduled in a building where his phone gets no service. He won't know anything for 3 hours, and by then you'll be leverage. Sarah made a run for it. Lucas didn't shoot. He just followed, calm and methodical. Sarah ran for the panic room Alexander had shown her weeks ago. down the hall, past the bedroom, 20 more feet. She almost made it, almost. Lucas grabbed her arm. She spun and fought back, landing a solid punch to his jaw that actually made him stumble. Remember, Sarah grew up in Queens. She knew how to fight, but Lucas was trained, former military, and he was stronger. As they struggled, Sarah managed to hit the emergency alert on her watch. A red light flashed. Lucas noticed and smiled. Smart girl, but Alexander won't get that alert for 90 minutes. Security override. I control everything in this building, Sarah. I always have. He pulled a syringe from his jacket pocket. Sarah's eyes widened. No, no, please. Lucas injected her before she could finish the sentence. She struggled, kicked, tried to scream, but the drug worked fast. Her vision blurred. Her legs gave out. I'm sorry it came to this, Lucas said, catching her as she fell. You were actually quite impressive, smarter than I gave you credit for, but you should have stayed a waitress. Everything went black. When Sarah woke up, she was in a place she didn't recognize. Cold concrete floor, dim lighting, the smell of oil and metal, a warehouse maybe, or a basement. Her hands were zip-tied in front of her. Her head throbbed from the drug. She tried to move and realized her ankle was chained to a support beam. Lucas was across the room, setting up a laptop and camera equipment. Ah, you're awake. Perfect timing. Sarah's voice was hoarse. Where are we? Somewhere Alexander will never find. At least not in time. Lucas adjusted the camera angle. We're about to have a very important video call. You're going to sit there quietly. If you scream, I'll gag you. If you fight, I'll sedate you again. Understand? Sarah's mind raced. She nodded slowly. Lucas opened his laptop, made the call. The screen split. On one side, Alexander appeared. He was in his car, driving fast, his face pale with panic. He'd gotten the alert somehow. On the other side, a woman appeared, older, elegant. Cold eyes, the widow. Alexander's voice came through the speakers, desperate. Lucas, what the hell is going on? Where's Sarah? Lucas turned the camera toward Sarah, let Alexander see her, bound, terrified. Hello, Alexander, I'm sorry it's come to this. I genuinely liked you, your father too, but business is business. The widow spoke for the first time. Her voice was like ice. Mr. Sterling, you've been very difficult to work with. I've tried negotiation. I've tried intimidation. Nothing seems to motivate you to do the right thing. Alexander's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Let her go. This is between us. No, the widow said calmly. This is about you giving me what I want, the encryption keys to your government contracts, the client lists, the proprietary algorithms, everything your father died protecting. You give me that and Ms. Chen lives. You refuse and Lucas will make her death very, very slow. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She looked at the camera. At Alexander, she could see the conflict in his eyes. He was actually considering it. Don't, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. Don't give them anything. Your father died for this. People are counting on. Lucas backhanded her across the face. The force of it split her lip. Blood dripped down her chin. Alexander's roar came through the speakers. Touch her again and I'll kill you myself. The widow smiled. You have 1 hour, Mr. Sterling. After that, Ms. Chen becomes a very tragic example of what happens when people refuse to cooperate, and you'll get to watch every second of it. The screen went black on her end. Sarah looked at Lucas, at the gun on the table, at the chain around her ankle. She had 1 hour to escape, or die trying. Sarah was tied to a chair in an abandoned warehouse. Lucas had propped up his phone, showing a video call split between Alexander's panicked face and a woman's silhouette. Alexander's voice came through desperate. Lucas, what are you doing? What I should have done 5 years ago. Your father was going to ruin everything, Alexander. The widow offered me $20 million to help stage his suicide. I did, and it worked until you became obsessed with finding his killer. The widow's voice came through the speakers, cultured, cold, terrifying in its calmness. Alexander, your father was a brilliant man, but a foolish one. He thought morality had a place in business. He believed technology companies had an obligation to protect people rather than profit from them. How quaint. You've inherited his stubbornness, but I'm hoping you're smarter. Alexander's voice was tight with rage. Let Sarah go. This is between us. No, the widow said simply. Sarah stays. Because you're going to give us the decryption keys to your company's defense contracts. Every algorithm, every backdoor, every piece of classified technology your company has developed for the Pentagon, Homeland Security, and the NSA. Or Lucas puts a bullet in her head. Live, right now. Sarah, still groggy from the sedative, managed to speak. Don't give them anything. Lucas looked down at her almost sympathetically. Noble, stupid, but noble. He turned back to the camera. You have 60 seconds to send the codes, Alexander, or I demonstrate that I'm serious. He pulled out his gun, pressed it against Sarah's temple. Sarah closed her eyes. Her whole body was shaking, but she refused to beg. Alexander stared at the screen, at Sarah, at the gun pressed against her head, at the codes that would compromise national security and put millions of lives at risk, at the woman who'd been brave enough to tell a billionaire to shut up. His voice came out slowly, defeated. I'm sending them, don't hurt her. Lucas's phone buzzed. File received. He checked it carefully, verified the encryption keys, compared them against stolen samples from the data breach. Everything matched. Smart choice. He lowered the gun from Sarah's head. She let out a shaky breath. The widow's voice came through again. Excellent, Lucas, terminate the girl anyway. Mr. Sterling needs to learn that betraying our organization has consequences. Sarah's eyes snapped open. You said I lied, the widow said simply. Lucas, please proceed. Lucas raised the gun again, this time pointed at Sarah's chest. But Alexander Sterling hadn't survived corporate warfare by being predictable, and Sarah Chen was about to learn that sometimes the bait catches the trap. Lucas, Alexander said calmly, check the file again really carefully this time. Lucas frowned, opened the file on his phone, his expression changed. What did you do? I sent you the codes, real ones. Fully functional. The NSA will be very interested to know you now possess them, and they're tracking that file's location in real time. You've got about 3 minutes before federal agents kick down whatever door you're hiding behind. Lucas's face went pale. You wouldn't, that file incriminates you too. I don't care, my father died protecting those codes. I'm not letting you sell them to the highest bidder, and I'm certainly not letting you kill Sarah. The widow's voice turned sharp. Lucas, kill the girl and get out, now. But Lucas was already moving, not toward Sarah, toward the exit. Lucas, the widow's voice was furious. Complete the job. I'm not going to prison for murder when the FBI is 3 minutes away. You want her dead? Do it yourself. He ran, the warehouse door slammed behind him. Sarah was alone, still tied to the chair, the laptop still showing the widow's silhouette. For a long moment there was silence. Then the widow spoke. Her voice was different now. Curious, almost impressed. Ms. Chen, you're quite remarkable, you know. Most people would have begged for their lives. You told him not to give me what I wanted. Sarah said nothing. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. I'm going to give you a choice, the widow continued. In approximately 2 minutes, federal agents will arrive. You'll tell them everything. Alexander will be arrested for transmitting classified information. Lucas will disappear. And I'll vanish back into the shadows where I've been operating quite successfully for 15 years. Or what? Or you take the thumb drive taped under your chair. It contains everything, every transaction, every person Lucas ever contacted, every offshore account, every crime I've committed. You give it to the FBI. Lucas goes to prison, I go to prison, and Alexander stays free. Sarah's mind raced. Why would you tell me that? Because I want to see what you choose. Revenge on Alexander for using you, or justice for his father? You have 90 seconds to decide. The call ended. Sarah looked down. There, taped under her chair, was a small thumb drive. She could hear sirens in the distance. What Lucas didn't know, the codes Alexander sent were a Trojan horse. The moment Lucas opened that file, it pinged the location to the FBI Cyber Division and activated every camera in that warehouse. Outside, tactical teams were moving into position silently. But the FBI was still 3 minutes out, and Lucas had just realized the codes were fake. His screen showed a simple message, error invalid encryption. Lucas's face darkened. He turned to Sarah, raising his gun. He played us, which means you're no longer useful. Sarah was still tied to the chair, but her mind was racing. Wait, the real codes, I know where they are. Alexander told me, insurance policy in case something happened to him. Lucas hesitated. You're lying. Am I? Why do you think he kept me so close? I wasn't just bait. I was his backup plan. He trusted me with information he didn't trust anyone else with, not even you. Lucas actually considered this. The gun lowered slightly. Sarah was lying, completely lying, but she was a waitress. She'd spent years learning to read people, to sell a story, to convince customers they wanted the special of the day. And right now, she needed 30 more seconds. Where? Untie me and I'll tell you. I'm not giving you anything while I'm chained up like an animal. Lucas took a step toward her. The warehouse door exploded inward. Lucas Hartman, drop the weapon. Tactical team, full gear, rifles raised. Lucas spun and fired wildly. Chaos erupted. Sarah threw herself backward in the chair, the impact breaking it apart and freeing her hands from the zip ties. In the confusion, Lucas ran. Through a back exit the tactical team hadn't covered yet. And Sarah Chen, waitress, fake girlfriend, bait, made a decision. She grabbed Lucas's dropped gun from the floor and ran after him. An FBI agent yelled behind her. Ma'am, stand down. She didn't stand down because Sarah had realized something. Lucas knew where she lived, where her mother lived, where her friends worked, her routine, her vulnerabilities, and if he escaped, her life was over. She'd spend the rest of her days looking over her shoulder, waiting for him to come back. The parking garage. Lucas was getting into a black sedan. Sarah ran at full speed, her lungs burning. Get out of the car, she pointed the gun. Her hand was shaking. Lucas froze, saw her in the rearview mirror. Slowly, he exited the vehicle, hands raised. You won't shoot me. You tried to kill me twice. Lucas smiled, that same condescending smile he'd given her 100 times. But you're not a killer, Sarah. You're a waitress who got in over her head. You serve food. You smile at customers. You don't execute people in parking garages. There was a long pause. Sarah's finger rested on the trigger. Lucas started to reach for something in his jacket. Sarah didn't shoot him. She shot out the car's tires, both front tires. The loud bangs echoed through the concrete structure. You're right, I'm not a killer, but I'm not prey either. FBI agents swarmed in from every direction, tackling Lucas to the ground. Sarah dropped the gun and raised her hands. An agent approached her carefully. Ma'am, are you injured? Sarah looked down at herself. Cuts, bruises, blood from her split lip. I'm okay. She wasn't okay, but she was alive. Lucas Hartman was arrested. The widow's identity was revealed through his communications, a former Sterling Innovations executive named Catherine Wright who'd been presumed dead in a car accident 8 years ago. She was apprehended in Geneva 3 days later. And Sarah Chen went home 1 week later. Sarah was in her apartment packing boxes when Alexander knocked on her door. Sarah hadn't seen Alexander since the warehouse. He'd been in FBI debriefings, Senate hearings. His company was salvaged. His father's death was finally being investigated properly. And Sarah was trying to go back to normal. She opened the door. Alexander stood there with no bodyguards, no suit, just jeans and a t-shirt. Hi. There was an awkward pause. Can I come in? Inside, boxes were everywhere, half her life already packed away. You're leaving? New York isn't really home anymore. Too many memories. I owe you an apology, several actually. Sarah cut him off. You used me, you put my life at risk, you lied to me from the beginning. Yes, all of that, and I'm sorry, there's $500,000 in your account, double what I promised, and I don't want your money, Alexander. He stopped, looked at her. Then what do you want? Sarah laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in weeks. Honestly, I have no idea. A month ago, I was a waitress barely making rent. Now I've been poisoned, kidnapped, and shot at. I stopped a traitor. I helped take down a criminal syndicate, and I have $500,000 I didn't earn. She sat down on one of the boxes. I don't know who I am anymore. Alexander sat next to her. You're Sarah Chen, you're brave, you're smart. And you're the only person who ever told me to shut up and actually meant it. A small smile appeared on both their faces. Where will you go? Colorado. My aunt has a coffee shop in Boulder. Quiet, safe, boring. Sounds perfect. There was a pause. Alexander looked at his hands. Or you could stay, work for Sterling Innovations. We need a new head of security consulting. Turns out waitresses notice things trained professionals miss. You saw through Lucas when I couldn't. You kept your head under pressure. You understand people in ways my entire security team doesn't. Are you seriously offering me a job after everything? I'm seriously offering you a choice. Walk away, start fresh in Colorado, or build something new here. Either way, you earned it. This isn't charity. This is recognizing what you're capable of. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, past the billionaire facade, past the manipulation. At the man whose father was murdered and who'd spent 5 years seeking justice. If I stay, no more lies. No more lies. And you call me by my name, not the waitress. Alexander extended his hand. Deal, Sarah. They shook hands, held it for a moment longer than professional. Sarah Chen took the job. 6 months later, she'd rebuilt Sterling Innovations' security protocols from the ground up. She implemented systems that prioritized human observation over pure technology. She trained staff to notice patterns, read behavior, understand vulnerabilities that algorithms couldn't detect. Alexander's company became the most secure in the industry. And their fake relationship, it stayed fake, mostly. But there's one more thing you need to know. Something Sarah discovered 3 weeks into her new job, something that would make the Lucas Hartman situation look like amateur hour. Remember the widow, Catherine Wright? She was arrested, extradited, awaiting trial. But on September 14th, Sarah intercepted a message sent from Catherine's prison cell. To someone inside Sterling Innovations, someone still on the payroll. The widow wasn't the top of the organization. She was middle management, and whoever the bishop was, they were still inside, still watching, still waiting.